Hello, welcome to the Retro Game Gauntlet Reviewcast, where we play video games randomly decided for us for about a week, and we talk about them. I'm Turbografx. I'm here with Septopus.
Yo.
Alright, so we did our third venture into the magical realm of the PC Engine.
Or Turbografx 16 if you're a cool, patriotic American.
Well, I think I said Turbografx every other time, so I wanted to switch it up for our foreign listeners. We got a massive fan base working here, so we gotta accept that we've gone international, dude.
What do, actually, now that I think about it, since, when it comes to the actually using the Retro Game Gauntlet...
Ooh, we want to talk about the Ruskies?
It's more popular in it's more popular in Russia, so I'm wondering, do they opt to call it the Turbografx, or do they opt to call it the PC Engine?
So that we can cater to them and they will understand what we're talking about?
Yeah, I doubt they actually got a version of the console, so it's what do they call it? Unless they had their own
Dendy version?
Yeah, their own Dendy. What they
the Turbo Dendy 16?
Yeah, Turbo Dendy.
I imagine the Turbo Dendy is they just took Bonk but put a trunk on him and maybe a little baseball cap.
God.
We need a sick fan out there to draw that for us.
No, what it is, it's it's Bong's head on Fred Flintstone's body.
I'd ask 4chan to draw it for us, but they're on our blacklist now because they dropped the server that had the original one.
Yeah, the VR roller is no longer supported by them, so they no longer have threads about actual Retro Game Gauntlets on VR anymore because everyone would post, but no one would reply. And also everyone would get, Hello Kitty on their first roll and say, nah, leave it.
Well, let's be honest. The Retro Game Gauntlet itself sucks. The concept of going through the consoles, it's fun in concept, but it really doesn't work when you try to apply it.
No.
Even with us applying very liberally the way it works.
We don't follow the original rules of the game at all stringently. And we generally don't allow ourselves rerolls unless it's obviously just a board game or whatever, or it's a classic that you've already played and beaten. Yeah,
and then furthermore to that point, man, we have had some unbearable things. I don't think I would ever want to do the Gauntlet as it was originally written. That's just a bad idea. Because would you want to do RoboCop 3 and have to beat it, or go back to other shittier games?
Yeah, if you don't beat RoboCop 3, then you'd have to go back and start over.
Yeah.
And the original Gauntlet rules is you had to go back. Someone's no, because then you're just rolling the risk for even more shitty games.
Yeah, because you start hitting those older era things, and then you're gonna bump into DOS, and God knows what you're gonna get with DOS. You're gonna have to play Mahjong forever. So yeah.
You see, 4chan, this is what happens when you try and make original content. It starts to fucking suck after a while.
Ask traditional games how to make original content. They get it right 20% of the time. As far as internet forums go, that's a pretty good success rate.
They do it almost most of the time.
Mm-hmm. A quick question that will be related to my follow-up response. For the 90 games, does that include the CD?
No, that does. I do not believe that is the CD. That is only the cue cards, the 90 games.
Because I was going to ask, how does it feel? We've only done Turbografx in 3 sessions, but we've done, 5% of the games in its entire library.
So, yeah. I don't know how many actually, while we're discussing this, I might actually just curiously look up how many actual Turbo CD games were there.
It's pretty small, and I think aren't a good portion of them even re-releases?
There were updated versions of previous games that were on the Turbo CD. Yeah.
Where's Bonk CD, where he has to go back in time, and you have to bounce on a certain number of heads to go through time?
I think the East series, it had just Turbografx 16 versions, but then it also had a where it put the games together into one CD pack with updated graphics and sound and whatever.
Yeah, dude, I need Bonk CD, and then when you bounce on enough heads, it turns into Air Zonk. Just completely change up the gameplay. All right, so get into my game. I got the what's it called? I can't remember. I'll just edit this out.
You got JB Harold Murder Club.
My brain immediately went JB Usher. Yeah, I got JB Harold Murder Club. I knew, but before I got into the actual recording of the podcast, I knew I was going to forget it when I actually had to remember. Because I'd remember other times. So, the quick synopsis of this game is it's not very point and click, it's more menu-based. Mystery game, like, all of our Ace Attorney games. I think Ace Attorney is probably the most well-known example. I don't think a lot of other people would know. Trying to think of another game that would be pretty similar other than JB Harold. And it's not your straight up like a Tex Murphy or Uninvited, where it's more like you wander around in a building. It is more focused on you're a detective and you're going out there to solve your murder mystery. I don't think I need to bother with spoiler warnings. Other than there's going to be some sick twists and turns, but I'm very conflicted about how I'm going to have to recommend this. So take this one step at a time. When you start up the game, specifically note that we are playing on the Turbo CD version. So I don't know if it works differently on a DOS, if different of these qualities are in any way changed. I believe that there's also an NES version. And if you live in glorious Nippon, there is also a DS re-release, from what I've seen.
Yeah, the JB Harold's got like tons of versions.
Yeah.
It even has like the Sharp X68 like 1000. That one had full FMV with like actors and stuff, like doing all the lines and things.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
so,
it's like all live action, kind of neat.
Yeah.
So I imagine the loading is fucking slow.
I didn't think about that, because there's a lot of that. The voice acting, that'll be a point to make. One of the first things that will run is the music is actually pretty good until the game starts. So the sort of opening, it's got like a full lengthy, like 3-minute opening where it does, it has like opening credits and stuff like that, and does kind of a noir, cool detective look to it. And then you'll press the start button to actually run the game while it's playing like this smooth jazz, and then it turns into this sort of bit. I'll cut it in somewhere. Like it just like that really bass sounds like it would be in an NES game. Like I don't know. I don't have a lot of experience with the Turbografx, but you would say that its audio is more on par with like the Super Nintendo, would you say?
Yeah, certainly better than the 8-bit consoles.
Yeah, but when the game starts up, in fact, it probably was ripped straight from an 8-bit console by the low quality that it is. However, what you'll also get is it's got some sweet voice acting for every single line in the game. Now, this is both good and bad. The voice acting is pretty good. I don't know. You heard some of it, Septopus?
I heard a little bit. It seemed all right.
Yeah.
It seemed like 90s era, like PC adventure game kind of thing, audio I expect.
Yeah, it was charactered enough and, not played over the top, but still kept unique enough voices when they probably only had 4 people playing, like 30 roles. You have to, if you want to have audio throughout the entire thing, you'll have to specifically go into the menu, where if you open up the menu, that's the only other refuge for really nice jazz music. I'm definitely going to be playing the jazz for some of the openings and closings of this. Though I would suggest having it turned off if you're going to seriously play this, because it does slow down the text, and you're going to have to go through a lot of text. And it's kind of problematic the way you're going to have to go through the text.
Is this the voice acting slowing it down?
Yeah, the voice acting adds just like a little bit more load to it.
Like I was going to say, if you were talking about like having music running in the background.
Oh, no. I'm talking about the voice acting, if I didn't make that clear. So, what you're going to have to do is you start off in the police station, and there's a few places in the police station you can go, namely a records room. Some stuff you can check out there where it has some sort of past cases. I'm a little bit sad that you can't actually solve the past cases. They kind of just exist floating in there as early leads to go talk to other people, to give you an excuse to go to other locations. And you kind of go out into a big overworld map where you go from building to building, and you go through a long list of, interviewing different people who live in the town, asking them name, age, you gotta go and get everyone's blood type, and then you can ask everyone in town about everyone else in town, and then you can ask them about their hobbies, and you just go around collecting information like that. And what your goal early on in the game is to get some information that's going to be related to the murder of Bill Robbins. And you want to move into a phase where you can, 1, suspect them enough that you can actually search their premises, and then 2, get enough evidence that you can actually arrest them, and then finally you need to try and get confessions out of the people when you bring them into the interrogation room. So this game, it's very open in what you can do. You can do things in a lot of different orders, in contrast to, say, an Ace Attorney game. An Ace Attorney game it may not feel like it immediately, but it is kind of corridored. In an Ace Attorney game, you start off with maybe 2 or 3 locations. You go and you interview people, you ask them questions, you go to the first trial, and then at the first trial that opens up, 1 or 2 more places, and you kind of rinse repeat for what usually you get 3 trials, don't you?
It's usually, it's actually 2 trials. There's 2 investigations, 2 trials usually.
Is it just 2? I feel like it was a little bit more than that. But yeah, in that idea, it's very much like you talk to one person and that opens up the next location. And that new location usually has it has minor branching paths. But whereas this one, because you can go arrest one person way before you arrest someone else. And it all just kind of culminates to a big ending. And it kind of gives the illusion that you can investigate a little bit more. And it does a really good job of subverting your expectations. The person who was murdered, not only is he a wealthy businessman, but he is generally the least liked person in town. Even just the regular store owners mentioned that they wouldn't consider, or that they would at some point in time consider murdering him just because he was a jerk. So every town is built up to be, or every person is built up so that they look like they could have or want to murder the victim. And almost everyone has really weak alibis of, oh, well, I stayed home all day, or I decided to go out driving. Yeah.
The one I remember hearing in the brief time I saw you streaming the game was, look, I was just taking a walk around the cemetery.
Yeah.
Late, at midnight. What about
it? When I'm interrogating Groucho Marx. Yeah.
I was practicing knife juggling and then I cut myself.
So yeah, people have really weak alibis, and everyone has really strong motives. Almost everyone was missing. And furthermore, there are several, I don't want to call them secret societies, but lots of different sort of boys clubs and girls clubs for rich people. There's the White Eagles, there's the Anemone Club, there is, there's at one point in time you can even suspect if the Chamber of Commerce is behind it. There's the Red Tie Club, and
this doesn't take place in UK or whatever.
Well, what I was my thought of this matter is that it's Japanese people just pushing their normal club life attitude.
Yeah, I don't know, because just clubs for no other reason than to just be social or whatever. That's a UK thing or a New England. I don't know.
As far as I can tell, it was the United States. It was in I think the place was Liberty, USA was the name of the town. So I put it up to it's a, difference in culture thing where maybe they just think in Japan that Americans are like the British where it's all about the social club. It's all about the golfing club sort of thing. Or they just did it for the plot,
Because mysterious social groups like that are always mystery is afoot.
Yeah. Followed onto that the name of the game is Murder Club. And it just so happens that almost everyone in town belongs to a weird boys club that goes out drinking at night and riding horses or something like that. Or the Red Tie Club that base everything that they do off of mystery novels.
Oh, hello. We're the Serial Murder LARPers Association. We pretend to be serial murderers, and then we reenact important murders in history.
So, overall, it does a really good job, and I felt that was oftentimes something that Ace Attorney didn't always do the best, was subverting who was the guilty party. Usually the most that they ever did of that was just so that you could pressure someone into giving you more information. When they were standing trial, you would accuse them of the murder or make it look like they could potentially be guilty so that they give their full, truthful alibi that would inevitably actually make your own defendant look more guilty until the very end. But yeah, it does keep you kind of guessing and involved. Sadly, however, it really devolves into when you... I don't know if there's like a term for this, but when you just start rubbing evidence, you've collected your items and you just start rubbing them against people's faces, and then you ask them every single line in the dialogue tree to see if there's just something different.
And the term for like these adventure games, it's usually like they call it pixel hunting, but this isn't exactly that. It needs its term.
Because it's like you're string hunting instead of pixel hunting. You're looking for that specific line of dialogue that is slightly different than it was last time you talked to them. And when I say slightly different, I mean like sometimes the line of dialogue that says that you've made progress will be just a few words different, or the same kind of phrase but reworded. Just as that, like, all right, you've brought it up to them officially. Yeah, you'll have a lot of that. There's one person, Ralph Mouth, that really early on, it's like, holy shit, this guy is a suspect. He was dropped off at the murder scene during the murder. I found a gun in his room. There's a scarf with his blood on it. All sorts of things. He hated the guy and has actively talked about murdering him. He's in a criminal psychology course where he's writing a paper currently called How to Commit the Perfect Crime. But I can't bring this kid in as a suspect until you go to like the fishmonger's wife and ask her opinion of the kid, and says, I heard that he doesn't like that bill, and then I could arrest him. Even though, half the town already knows that Ralph didn't care for Bill, and Ralph himself says, dude, I wanted that guy dead. He was awful. But that wasn't enough to pull him in. No, that's not enough motive. Oh, and, I got lots of people who are saying, yeah, no, we dropped him off at the murder scene, like 10 minutes before the murder. So, isn't that weird?
Golly.
Yeah. So, you're going to have a lot of problems with that. Something I'm actually very sorry to say, if you take the Gauntlet as a very black-white, I technically did not finish the game. I got every suspect to be cleared, except for one guy. And the reason why I couldn't close the deal is I was missing one piece of evidence. I know where that piece of evidence is. I know what that piece of evidence is. However, I cannot figure out, what string of dialogue I need to make that evidence magically appear in the location that it is. I talked with you a bit earlier, Septopus, to give you an idea as to how specific these trees are. So you'll bring in maybe a dozen people as suspects into the interrogation room. And I was having trouble getting the widowed wife of the victim to give her full confession. And I knew I had all the evidence, and I've done all the dialogue. But what I had to do was, one of the reasons why she was being accused was she had only recently taken out a life insurance policy just, a few weeks before the guy was murdered. So she seemed suspect of killing him for the insurance reasons. Now, I can't just talk to her about the insurance and then she'll give me the full story as to what was happening. No, I had to go to every other person in the interrogation room, show them the insurance policy, get their slight opinion on it, and then ask her about the insurance policy. And then finally she would give me the full confession. Now, the big problem about this is you'll probably bring people into the interrogation room at different times, and some people will get cleared before others. So you're going in and out, and it's not just you have to have shown everyone the insurance policy. You have to have, in the same session of interrogations, show everyone the insurance policy. So you're calling in people that you've already cleared, because once you clear someone, you usually oh, I don't need to talk to that guy anymore. He's good. So I could not figure out what was going on. And just how bad getting this last piece of evidence. I actively looked it up. There's almost no guides as a forewarning to this game. And if you watch someone do a full playthrough of it, you can't take in all that information because even they just are like going down the list. They just do it kind of in the fastest method possible.
Oh, that's what I was gonna ask. Is it like, was there no way to just find that like right audio dialogue that you were missing?
That I went to the location. Here's what I would have to do. Is I would have to go speak to every person individually, give them every line, and possibly do it twice. This is one of those games where it has a problem of show them a piece of evidence. They say, "Oh, I don't know that." Show it again. All right, fine, I'll tell you about it.
That's the worst.
Yeah. Future programmers, hey, you boys making video games out there, don't ever do that. It's an awful idea. Just don't. Last podcast. We talked about a similar concept.
Yeah, I talked about how Catherine did a really good thing where they had more things to say, and Icon would just straight up pop above your head and say, "Hey, talk to them."
Yeah, which you don't need to be as direct, but make it obvious that you don't. Okay, first of all, don't ever make so you have to show the same item twice. Just don't do that. All right. If you want that effect of them being hesitant, have them go, "I don't know what that is." Ellipses. All right, fine, I'll tell you. Instead of having me show the item twice.
I don't know, does JB Harold ever speak in this game?
Only in the records room, as I recall, and probably during the closing. Mm-hmm. He reads the records aloud. Why, do you have a question about his voice?
Oh, no, I was just curious about the way things, like, you were giving like a hypothetical of how the dialogue should go. Like, could they have JB Harold say something like, "Really?"
Yeah,
or have some kind of like contradiction that force them to out.
They never have JB Harold actively talk to the people, but they had a voice actor for him, and he does speak in other scenes. But it's the sort of speaking to yourself as he reads old police documents,
right?
Being hard boiled and what have. So yeah, I know who did it. I know the piece of evidence I have to find. I can't find it. I would have to spend 2 hours going through every single person in town. Every person that I've put into interrogation, and it really ends up not being worth it. And this is the part that really makes me sad. To go back to the item just real quick as a note, it's so difficult to find. I found several people saying that the game was actually glitched, to which other people would respond, "No, it's actually not glitched. It's just that awful to find it." People were thinking that maybe they accidentally closed off the way to get it, but that's not the case. Yeah. It's just so esoteric that you cannot find a guide that says you need to have talked to these people like this to do it. I'm very much conflicted about this game, and it seems like a lot of other people who give this game a review feel sort of the same way, and it's, you really, really like the game. It's got a lot of cool elements, it's got an interesting plot, it's got decent voice acting, it's got a cool atmosphere, a cool whodunit, but the mechanics of the game itself drags it down so much that I cannot give it a real recommendation. Mm-hmm. Like, I would love to recommend this game. Maybe future JB Harold games are better designed, or maybe re-releases are better. If someone wants to go out there and get one of those... I actually went to one of those translation guides for, they always have those for the weebs that decide to get Animal Crossing before its international release date. Mm-hmm. They have everyone in their Japanese names so that you can play the game in an illegible format. That was the closest thing to a guide I was able to get for this game. So you're going to be on your own if you're playing this. And if anyone out there picked up this podcast because they're a fan of it, I would love it if you would tell me, how did you get the contacts if you know? How do you find the contacts?
You should have been the first one to write the GameFAQs guide on this.
I would have loved to have written the guide, except I have no idea how I got to half of my things. And I think that's part of the problem is because it becomes so routine if you just go from person to person asking every single possible question that you don't know what it is that set off the potential for you to arrest Ralph Malph, So, this game... I give this game a 0 out of 10. You should definitely go play it. I had a lot of fun. This is a grandpa game. I like grandpa games that are slow, methodical, and don't require a lot of button pressing. If you like those kind of games, you'll probably like this too. You got any other cool questions for me, Septopus?
Is there fail states in this game? I don't think there was. Yeah,
not a single one. So you're gonna win. The only way you can lose is if you give up. I might even go back to the game when I just have time and just go through all the dialogues. But as far as doing the podcast, it's not like I'm gonna learn anything new. You know.
Right. Before we get into my game, I was just out of curiosity, since we were talking about the Turbografx CD and the Turbografx itself, looking up the games. So yeah, I was right. It was like 90 or so cue cards, and then the CD had 20 something.
Yeah,
it was like it was
like that.
It's like 20 CDs and then 20 for the Super CD. So I guess 40 in total, with the Super CD being a little more horsepower.
I don't know nothing about the Super CD and how different it is, if at all.
So I was just looking down the list of games, and one of the things I found is it has like a very small section of just unlicensed games.
Yeah.
One of which was the Local Girls of Hawaii, and I was like, I'm gonna go download that because I have no shame. while you were describing that, while you're describing the JB Harold Murder Club. And what it is, it's just basically a CD pack of like really low resolution images of naked Hawaiian girls. But the reason why I bring it up is because the images themselves are like they're pure vaporwave.
That's what I was imagining.
Yeah,
in my brain.
Here. I'll send you, because I tweeted them all out on my Twitter. That's a good sampling of them. If we have the video version of this podcast, you can put them there too if you want.
These are more beautiful than I expected. I didn't expect them to be put through filters.
It's filters and it's the compressed resolution. It's amazing.
Dude, already you get a like immediately. You're famous. What are you gonna do with all that Twitter money? How many Turbografx are you gonna buy with all that Twitter money?
I'm not a promoted tweeter yet.
Are you gonna play Commander Keen on your new Turbografx?
No, it's not Keen. Okay. Anyway, I just felt like I had to bring that up before I talk about a real game.
Well, it may not be a game, but I'm sure as hell gonna have a lot of fun with it. Tell us about your game.
No, you're really not. It's pretty milquetoast, the images. But yeah, I did. When it comes, well, you did the. As far as Turbografx is concerned, we both actually did kind of like fairly iconic games. Like JB Harold's been on a lot of things, but as far as like the early like Western releases, the Turbografx CD was sort of like the one, because it was like sort of like the first, and it was also just like when I was briefly looking it up, it was like also like sort of like first major games. We were talking about the voice acting, saying it was pretty good. It was actually like but at the time it was like considered the best. Mm-hmm. And it was because it's also like one of the few games where not only did it have audio tracks, it also had whole new audio tracks for just slight variations in dialogue.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you though, one, just the extensiveness of the dialogue, but the other thing is the lack of load times. It didn't have to like do a little load every time someone was going to talk, which is really nice when you have to go through massive amounts of text. Though I did say early on, turn off the dialogue if you want to actually beat this game, because you got to go through still a whole lot of dialogue and come be hearing the same things over and over. But yeah, carry on about Commander Keen.
I was going to say, so, and then I also got like, as far as like Turbografx games, next to Bonk's Adventure, I basically got the Turbografx game, which is Keith Courage in the Alpha Zone. And this game, and part of what makes this game so definitive is it was before Bonk got famous. It was the game you got for free with your Turbografx.
Yeah. It
came bundled with the console.
Yeah, because Bonk was, in the like second wave releases and stuff like that is when it was the bundled game, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it was. I don't think it was with like any new Turbografx console, but it was like, after like the first initial shipping, it was obvious Bonk was the game, so they started releasing the Turbografx with that instead of Keith Courage.
Yeah.
But anyway, Keith Courage is it's a game it's so obviously like a localized game. It's adapted from like a very small anime series, which I don't think like at all was like even big in Japan really. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so it has like a lot of like hilarious, just sort of like localizations. Like it's like the companion who heals you is like some girl like wearing like a traditional like Chinese like dress and pants with like little buns like Chun-Li. But her name is Nurse Nancy. Yeah, she shows up and she's like, "Hello, my name is Nurse Nancy, and I'll heal you." As if the title of it being called Keith Courage, when you're obviously like wearing like some kind of like ancient Chinese or ancient Japanese like warrior outfit or whatever. You look like a Saiyan. Yeah, the basic premise of this game is it's sort of like each level is sort of broken in these two parts. It has the overworld, and then there's the underworld sections of the game. Overworld section is very traditional platformer. You walk from left to right. You got a level sword, and you just bop enemies. And it's I don't know if this is like the right comparison. You'll have to correct me, since I think you actually did play Clash at Demon Head.
Yeah. That's what I was kind of imagining from the little bits of screenshots and the way you described it. It's a semi-narrative kind of... Well, go on with what it is, and I'll give you the comparison afterwards.
Yeah, I was going to say, like Clash at Demon Head, where it sort of has these sort of overworld platforming sections where you beat up enemies to collect money to buy upgrades.
Yeah. It's got that sort of action RPG thing going on.
Yeah. So that's what it is. It's like sort of overworld is a much more simplistic platforming, less hazards, and the main purpose of it is to basically grind out the smaller enemies to earn money to buy stronger swords for the underworld section. And they make no like way of they don't hide it at all. It's not like they're trying to trick you to play the game longer. Like straight up, when you're playing the overworld, there's just parts of the game where like these lucky cats fall from the sky, and if you hit them, they give you more money than most regular enemies. And they're generally placed nearby stores, so it's like that's straight up the format of the game. Earn money in the overworld, fight the harder enemies in the underworld, kind of thing.
Well, I guess you can't complain when compared to, say, like Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest, where you do have to do the grind, but it almost the grind doesn't work out where it benefits you at all. You have to really just put your nose against the grindstone and work at it. It sounds like this really gives you stuff for it.
Thankfully, for the most part, since it makes no point of hiding the fact that you're grinding for money in the overworld, and it just gives you up this straight up, here's the lucky cats falling from the sky. They give you more money when you attack those enemies. So at least it's like it's not gonna tug your dick around like pretending like, ooh, you're playing the real game right now, kind of thing. Yeah. So what it is basically you go from a small left to right, and then you reach like this sort of like ancient shrine, and this ancient shrine, of course, because it's ancient and mystic, turns you into a robot. Yeah, so it's sort of like you go, and it has like this little transformation scene where like a rainbow falls from the sky, and then like your guy's like standing there and goes like da 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 da, and then you're a robot now. Which I believe it calls it the Neo suit is what it is at least in this translation. I don't know what it was in the anime.
Probably Neo suit.
Yeah. So overworld looks like generic like Japanese like mystic woods or whatever with shrines and enemies or whatever. Then you go into underworld where it's like you're in caves with like a whole bunch of weird pillars, and then the enemies also get noticeably weirder. Like overworld, it was things like you're fighting mice or whatever, or you're fighting like little Baba Yaga creatures or whatever. And this one, you're like the first like enemy you see is like this guy where is like this. It's a head with arms and legs wearing sunglasses, and the top of its head is just like a pistol, like a 6-shot revolver, and it shoots bullets at you from its forehead. So that's the primary way of the thing is the overworld is a left to right. For the most part, the underworld is like a sort of like zigzag left to right descending kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? Where it's sort of like you reach the end and then you fall down to the lower level. So it's sort of like that with like occasional like dips upward. Like you'll sort of like, so you're basically sort of like zigzagging up and down throughout the entire level until you sort of hit the final falling point where you then fight the boss. And I would say probably the format of this game, it works out okay at first, like you get it, But then as the game goes on, it gets really tiring because it never really changes or gets more interesting. Because basically what it is you grind enough money to get the new sword, and then all the boss fights are basically just, reach the boss fight with full health or enough health, and then just mash the attack button with your sword.
Yeah.
And then just just straight up only one boss. Well, I guess technically two bosses, but I'll get into that in a moment. Are like ones where I was like, oh, or I actually had to sort of like plot my sort of timing of how I was going to fight this guy. Because first one, and I guess like I kind of realized it because it became a double-edged sword because it's a trope I really love in games, but it's also obviously it also became the obvious problem with these bosses. And it's a trope I like where bosses you fight in the first levels become regular enemies in the later levels. So, I love it when games do that, and I think more should do it because it always makes you feel really cool.
Makes you feel like a fucking badass.
Yeah, you feel like a badass when you do this. But because of the problem is because when they were bosses, they still had like mob AI, as in they stand there and they do their attack basically kind of thing. Yeah. So yeah, it took more hits and they did more damage back then, but there wasn't really any strategy to it. And like the first guy, he looks very similar to the gun guys, only instead of a gun, he like throws like a chain arm or whatever at you. So he's got like some thing that hits you and pulls you in and hurts you. Second boss, I could be wrong. I'm just doing this based off of memory from like a week ago, but I believe like the next guy you sort of fight like he's like a magician who just sort of like teleports around throwing cards at you, and that one you can't just sort of run into them and attack him since he teleports. But in the end, it's like basically the same thing. It was never like a strategy; it was pure attrition basically to defeat him. And then after that, you do sort of like you'll do like combo bosses where it's like fight two of them at the same time kind of thing. And then there's the one where it's sort of like a big flying robot, and that was the first one where it's like an actual challenge where I said, okay, I need to think and actually like plan when I'm gonna jump to attack him or when I'm going to like sort of duck to dodge his attacks. Take a sippy. So there's only really one boss where I was like where I felt like I had to plan it out. So that's the basic format of the game. I want to talk about the controls of it because the controls I guess when they're not bad, but it's the sort of thing like if you've been growing up playing Sonic the Hedgehog and Super Mario Brothers, you're kind of, I guess you're in a sort of sense you feel spoiled on good platforming mechanics because Keith Courage does not really control all that well. At first you don't think about it much, it seems fine. But after you played both overworld versions of just Keith Courage and then the underworld versions of the Neo Suit, the way they actually change how they move, you start to feel it after you experience both. So after you say played the first level and you've done both forms, when you go back to Keith Courage in the second level, all of a sudden you feel really sluggish and slow. I was getting RoboCop 3 fat ass flashbacks of just how slow and how no distance he gets with his jumps.
Yeah, I'm curious if you were to actually turn on Clash of Demon Head, if you would have similar complaints, because Clash of Demon Head, its platforming is weird. It doesn't function right. It almost feels like you're half on a grid where you only have so much control. Yeah, that's a good way I'd say. Is it feels like you're sort of on a grid or you're moving from points on an X and Y axis. Yeah, you're on a grid, but they did a really good job of hiding it, as opposed to say a Pokemon or your normal top-down RPG where it's obvious tiles. They hid the fact that you're on a grid.
Yeah, and I was gonna say another good example of sort of how it feels off. This resonates a lot with me, but I don't know about you. But if you ever play a lot of Flash platformer games, where it just obviously when you make games on Flash, even the best platformers, the one on Homestar Runner with 20xd6.
Yeah.
Even the best ones, they still felt a little off. There's just something that it just obviously wasn't built to do that.
They have a weird awkward smoothness or very weird rigidness to them.
Yeah, it's a rigidness, and there's a sort of it doesn't feel like a correct collision with corners and stuff.
Yeah.
it feels like you should have landed there but you don't, or you sort of like can obviously walk too far off of the cliff if you're like tapping it kind of thing. So it has a lot of that. It's like it's hard. It's like I feel weird like insulting it because it's hardly bad. But when you've been spoiled on just obviously really good platforming mechanics, it just obviously feels dated in that comparison. And then sort of like the opposite problem happens when you become the Neosuit version of Keith Courage, where he just like you'll like tap it and he just like fucking zips and it's weird. And you feel too fast and you feel too slippery while you're riding it. It almost like he runs like he's like on like roller skates. It feels like you don't have like a good control over his momentum. With Keith on Overworld, it's like rigid. It's rigid and hard to maneuver. With him, it's like too slippery and you don't know where you're going. And also when you're playing as Neosuit, you're also a big fat ugly like sprite. So getting a good gauge on your hitbox and the collision with everything else is also weird.
Am I imagining right to have in my head like one of those like chibi Gundams? I don't know what they're called.
Yeah, he definitely looks like he looks like a Gundam from like Super Robot Fighter or something like that. Yeah, that's definitely what he sort of looks like. But yeah.
So when he's Keith Courage not in the suit, is his sprite noticeably smaller, or because I'm imagining like block shapes for both of them? Or is he really kind of the same shape, just his sprite doesn't look it?
I would say the sort of height is relatively the same, I think. Mm-hmm. He's like a few pixels taller when he's in the Neosuit. His width, on the other hand, is like, if not twice the width, it's like 1.5 times the width. So it's a very fat and wide sprite.
Mm. You get to play as a cube going around.
But, though, I think I might have brought this up on one of our earlier Turbografx ones, where it was sort of like the marketing angle for buying a Turbografx was, compared to the NES, our sprites are huge!
Yeah, I think we talked about that for, for Night Creatures, because it had those really big sprites that they didn't know how to have collision for.
And once again, this is a game where, even not talking about the robot, talking about Keith Courage on Overworld, it's a sprite that's like a head taller than Mario's in Super Mario 3 kind of thing. Yeah. It's like he's got one head height on that Mario guy. He's big. It's a big sprite, you guys. Yeah, so that's like those. So it plays fine. It plays good enough. But like I said, the format gets bad. Like earlier, I wasn't complaining about the sort of money grind, but the last level where you need to get the final sword, that one is like, just come on, like how much money it asks. It like suddenly asks for like 3 times the amount you've been asked in the past. So you're grinding, and it's like it's funny because even though it has the cats that give you money, it's still like just too slow. So what I had to do is like I had to find like the perfect like pixel perfect spot where I could like walk left to right to respawn more enemies to jump from the right and left sides of the screen. So that way basically I could like go take 2 steps to the right, kill enemy, take 2 steps backwards, kill that enemy, then kill cat, take 2 steps, kill enemy, take 2 steps back. It became a rhythm game where I had to have the perfect rhythm so that all the enemies spawned at the right time, so I could get the best money efficiency for it.
Yeah, there's a point towards the end of Wizards and Warriors that's like that. But let me ask you, comparatively, would you have preferred? Because this is definitely where they were like, okay, grind more for this. But this is like the final item, the final super sword. But
yeah, and the way the characters talk, I believe you need the sword, like not just to make it easier. I think you actually need to defeat the boss with it.
But the juxtaposition of other games where money no longer is an object, what would you rather deal with? Not having the grind at all, and it's literally just a walk to the store and then a walk to the next area, or would you take the too much grind? Because one is a pain in the ass, the other one is unfulfilling.
It's like I would honestly just say, here's what I would do is one, maybe, it's a thinker. And I don't want to just say, make a game that doesn't do either. Just make a game
You're not allowed to choose make a game that has perfect grinding. We're assuming that's not an option in this situation.
Here's, I I think in this instance, ultimately, I would have just preferred no grinding.
Okay.
In this one, while it's not a big deal on the earlier levels, it never really added anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like and I applaud them for just cutting out the middleman and say, yeah, you're grinding on Overworld, so here's some enemies that give you more money than normal.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's like maybe before you reach that point, maybe go back to the drawing board and see maybe what you could do differently, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like that's the kind of thing where you had an idea for the game, something's not quite working out, so instead of going back and reviewing it, you sort of like put like another Band-Aid on top of it, hoping no one would notice, kind of.
Well, saying that,
So it's like,
at least this sword was required. I mean, I guess they could have potentially had just the overworld is an adventure, and then at the end you get an item, and then there's the underworld where you use the item.
maybe make a boss give it to me. I don't know.
Yeah.
Make a mini boss. Before I get to the final boss, I'm just thinking if there's anything I need to touch on more, because the game's pretty simple. So I'm trying to think. Now let's just get to the final boss. So anyway, yeah. So that's the main. So that's like a big issue with the game. And then we finally get to the final boss. And as I had mentioned earlier, there were two bosses that I felt like there was real skill involved. One was the one where it's sort of like the flying robot that swoops down at you, and then there's this one, the final boss. Final boss is it's not a recolor of the swooping robot. It's a Newton unique. It's a real, or actually, you know what? Yeah, it was a recolor. Now that I think about it, it's a recolor. It is a recolor of the swooping boss, but it has like a new robot companion that's on the ground that's like constantly attacking you and is invulnerable. It's not the thing to attack at all.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, you could no longer do like because when the initial flying robot boss happened, kind of the basic strategy would be kind of like lay low and like stay in the same relative spot. But now you can no longer do that because you now have like a ground robot that approaches you. So it just makes the regular pattern more complex. And this one the previous fight with him was mind-bogglingly, or not mind-boggling hard. It was kind of difficult. But this one, on the other hand, was like significantly difficult that I could not do it. Like it was like it came to the point where I was like in my head I was like I could obviously do this if I had full health into it, but it's also the longest underworld level, and you're guaranteed to not try and do it. And I tried grinding like the enemies before it to try and get health, but it would be like I'd be there for like an hour trying to grind health. So it was like and I was pretty ready to give up on the game until I found the bug that makes the boss not do anything. And it's a Ninja Turtles level of like boss glitch where it just doesn't work anymore.
Mm-hmm. Or like Shadow Link in Zelda 2, where you just sit in the corner and kind of just stab, and he'll just keep walking into your sword over and over. Yeah,
that's another example. But this one, for whatever reason, so normally it's like when you enter the boss thing, you fall down a pit, and it's like you land into like the big boss arena.
Mm-hmm.
For whatever reason, if you don't fall straight down, instead you jump further to the left, so like you basically jump over the hole, and there's like another small platform there that doesn't do anything, it's just there. But if you fall into the level from the left side instead of the right side, the boss's AI just doesn't turn on. So that's how I beat so a little deflated and a little anticlimactic, but that's how I beat the boss, is I jumped from the other side of the level and it turned off his AI. So you stand there and you jump up and you hit him 20 times, and then the boss dies because it's brain dead.
Hooray!
Yep. And here, let me get because I need to get the windscreen quote for you. I need to read it off for everyone so we can all appreciate it.
Did you put it on your Twitter?
Yes, I have it on my Twitter, of course.
On your Twitter, at JB Usher?
At JB Usher, JAYBEE.
That's B like a bumblebee.
Yeah, be like a bumblebee. USHER.
Like, as in the fall of.
Shut up. Sorry, Mushroom Twitter has taken up my timeline. It's taken a while. Here we go. Now let's read off this deep lore. The victory is complete. Keith Courage has battled and defeated the beastly alien dudes. Acronym BAD. Bad. Fighting through the 7 deadly zones, Keith has restored the planet Earth to its former peace, a peace his father knew well and died for. So there you go. And it's like, I didn't look up the lore for this game, so it blindsided me when it turns out that I'm fighting the beastly alien dudes. Talk about some 90s localization.
Play Kid Nicky, Radical Ninja.
So there you go. And that's basically Keith Courage. I don't know, my discussion of it was probably pretty short, but it was a pretty simplistic game in the end. Not a bad game. And I'm sure anyone who has any passing interest in Turbografx is definitely going to play this game at least once. Ultimately, this game probably would not be thought of as fondly or as memorably if it did not come with the Turbografx kind of thing. That's probably a big step in sort of what sort of locked it in people's memories. It was the launch game with the Turbografx, and not only was it a launch game, it was the game you got free with.
Here's a question that maybe we should take into consideration, especially when we play these slightly more obscure consoles like the Sega CD and of course the Turbografx. Because would you believe it? Not a lot of people know what the Turbografx is. It's still a little quiet. I'm gonna blame James Rolfe. I don't think he's played any Turbografx games.
No, he hasn't. He hasn't actually.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's got a pretty good library.
I mean, a big part of that is they hardly marketed it at all. I remember reading somewhere that straight up the only places Turbografx CD commercials even were aired was in major cities.
Ooh, ouch.
No. So basically, no one in Flyover America even could really sufficiently hear about the game unless they had gaming magazines.
Yeah, but here's the question, and I think we need to ask ourselves this on top of just our recommendation. For people who haven't heard of these consoles or only vaguely know of it, like the Sega CD, is it worth going out and getting an emulator to play this game? If you didn't, because once again with Keith Courage, if you already know about the Turbografx and are interested in emulating it,
you already know about Keith Courage and you've already probably played it.
Yeah, but for someone who's a little more layman, is this a game where you'd say go pick up a emulator and go play this game?
With this game, ultimately, if that's the kind of recommendation, I'd probably say you'll be fine without it.
Yeah.
Game's not super remarkable. It's got some neat, memorable visuals, like the gun, like some of the enemies, including the gun guy. Nurse Nancy's also a funny character. You see her there's this funny subplot that runs through the entire game. Now that I'm thinking about it. Where first you just meet Nurse Nancy and she's just the character who's healing you after you give her some money or whatever. Mm. But if you enter other houses, you turn out that she's trying to practice she's trying to practice magic so that she can be cool like you. So you'll enter rooms and it'll be Nurse Nancy there, but she won't heal you. She'll say, "Get out!" And then you go to another room and it'll be where the weapons master is, and you talk to him after you buy the sword from him. He's like, "By the way, Nurse Nancy's trying to practice your magic. Maybe you should give her some tips." Just she needs help. It's got neat quirks in it if you want to check it out. But as far as if you want raw solid gameplay, it's not going to do a whole lot for you probably.
Yeah. Being one of your higher reviewed games, go back to it, because I'll say right now, of all the Turbografx, if you didn't already know about the Turbografx, I don't think I had anything worth. But what about Silent Debuggers? Just to bob back to that one real quick. Is that one that you would say, go pick up an emulator and go play it?
Yeah, with Silent Debuggers, retroactively, I'd say totally just go ahead and try it out. It's worth playing.
Yeah.
But what about you? I know you have a huge recommendation for Night Creatures.
Well, I got Night Creatures, I got World Class Baseball, and I got JB Herald. Of which JB Herald, as you know, I gave it a sterling review. I loved it. Don't play the game.
Great. That's the unique kind of review that doesn't come up often enough. It's a great game, but do not play it.
I think I've gotten a couple of those, haven't I? That's what my last game was. The what's it? Enkoku Shinwa. The game was pretty cool. I had some fun with it. It was interesting. Don't bother. You know what? If you are only peripherally aware of the Turbografx, I think I can give it the same review that I gave Enkoku Shinwa. Look at the screenshots. Probably be more interesting than playing the game. Just go to JB Usher. Go to @JB Usher on Twitter and look for his screenshots and just put them in a folder. Then you can post them to whatever forum you use.
I use Fark. I'm a dedicated Fark user.
Well, are we ready to roll?
Alright, you'll have to send me the link again.
Alright.
I should probably bookmark it around.
I got it bookmarked because I don't want to lose... I'm afraid of losing the lasagna cloud. Bam! Is it just me, or is it like in a higher quality resolution than I remember? I feel like it's popping out at me. Alright, so, you want to do the countdown?
Alright. 3... Oh, by the way, we're doing Super Nintendo.
Yeah, we're doing Super Nintendo. Dude, I'm gripping the seat right here. I'm so frightened.
I'm sweating over here. Alright, 3, 2, 1, go.
Oh, I've never played it. Oh, wait, no, this is the shittier one of the two. I got Disney's Aladdin.
Well, that's a debate. That's a serious debate, you know. You can't
From
just
everything I know, the Genesis one is ahead above the rest.
Yeah, just be careful. You just can't go around saying it's obviously the better one. People fight wars over that. Anyway.
Hey, the Genesis doesn't have a lot. Let it have Aladdin.
Anyway, I got Pretty Soldier Sailor Moon, Another Story. I don't think it's gonna be good, but hey, who knows?
I love all those like little addendums. I like the Pretty Soldier part. I love the, what was it, Another Day?
Mm-hmm. Another Story.
Another Story. I'm looking up your game because I already know what Disney's Aladdin looks like. I think I'm playing that. I've never actually played it.
I'm sad now too because I clicked the random twice on the SNES, and the second game that came up was called Bastard, Dark God of Destruction.
You'll never roll it again because the library is too big.
I will never get to play Bastard, Dark God of Destruction. I'm playing Sailor Moon. I'm
gonna look up your game right now. I see an image of this. I don't know.
Oh, it looks like is it a JRPG actually?
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
I wasn't expecting that. I thought when I first saw the title, I thought it was the Sailor Moon fighting game. That's what I thought it was.
Yeah, I think both of us, we know about fuck all about Sailor Moon.
I know in the English dub she's called Meatball Head. that's the insult the one boy always says, like, hey, get away from me, Meatball Head.
Yeah, we all have only like the most periphery knowledge of Sailor Moon. I'm gonna learn some stuff.
Okay.
I want to know everything about Sailor Moon when you're done with this.
One of them fucked a unicorn, I think. I think that happened. I don't know. Yes. Maybe I'll watch a little Sailor Moon in preparation.
We'll watch it together. You're gonna come down to my place. You're gonna sniff glue. I'm gonna turn on the grow lights. I'm gonna watch Sailor Moon.
Dub or sub?
Well, we're sniffing glue, so we're gonna have to get the dubs.
Alright. Hopefully there's an English patch of this, because I don't think it was English released.
Yeah, I'm guessing it's not. I'm seeing the title cards and they're in Japanese. But from just screenshots, I think I'm seeing. Have you ever patched a game before, really? Other than, I think you did Earthbound?
In the past.
Or Mother3?
I could figure it out.
Okay. If you get scared...
Actually, looking up on Emu Paradise, looked like it's already got a patched version.
Oh, they got a pre-patched one? Okay.
Yes, whatever.
Shh. You kids getting your pre-patched things. I remember when I used to go to Zophar's Domain back like 14 years ago, get my sweet MP3s of all my favorite video game soundtracks.
Did you play on Nesticle as well?
Nesticle with the dankest information screens.
Yeah, with the fucking like, what was it, like a pile of shit or whatever?
Yes.
The game.
Well, there's several ones I think on the version.
And of course the desktop shortcut is just a picture of balls. Just a hairy pair of balls.
I got it right here. Bow to the fecal lord. Nesticle Zapotech.
Emulation was such a mature place back then.
Well,
good night, fecal lords.
we got games to play. All right.
Anyway, that's our fans' names now. Fecal Lords.
They're now the Fecal Lords.
Yeah.
Anyone who doesn't play purely by buying the video games, if anyone follows in our footsteps by emulation, it's because they're a Fecal Lord. Oh god, Sean sent out a text saying that Nyan Cat is 5 years old.
Wow. 5 years ago was 10 years ago.
Dude, do you know what that means? That means that Boomhauer Copter is 5 years old.
This podcast still going on.
And the recording's going, but I would have cut it off at this point.
Okay.